In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the key things that separates the top 1% of copywriters from the bottom 99%. And what is that? It's understanding that there are fundamentally two types of consumer B2C copywriting, and both of them are incredibly important. So what are the two types of consumer copywriting? Well, the first type, and this is the one that you normally hear about, is designed to generate short-term sales. It's designed to generate revenue in the immediate term. The second type, it has a very different purpose. It's designed to drive long-term growth. It's more of an investment rather than something that's designed to generate immediate results. So let's talk about the first type. So copywriting designed to generate short-term sales. This is really what most people are talking about when they say copywriting. So when you pick up a copywriting handbook, when you look at what people are talking about on YouTube or in blog posts, it's this salesy short-term revenue generating type of copywriting. And normally what you see with copywriters or copywriting gurus is they'll either praise this type of copywriting and dismiss the type that's designed to drive long-term growth. And the reason that they're dismissing it is simply because they don't know how to do it well. They don't understand how it works because it's actually very complicated. It's very complicated to measure. It's very unclear as to what makes good copywriting that drives long-term growth. And in some cases, people don't even dismiss this copywriting at all. They just think all copywriting is designed to generate short-term sales. This simply isn't true. And it's particularly not true when you're really ambitious and you're trying to build a big brand rather than just something that generates some small pocket change from immediate sales. So big impact copywriting really needs to focus a bit more on this long-term growth. And this is something that I'm going to be able to teach you. So let's try to answer the question as to why most copywriters only focus on the short term. There are some obvious reasons for this. People like short-term results. People are impatient. But I think one of the more sophisticated reasons as to why copywriters focus on the short term really has to do with this paradigm that we're in right now, this scientific, analytic, engineering paradigm, where we think everything needs to be measured and tracked because what gets tracked is what matters. So the thing with short-term sales types of copywriting is it's very easy to measure. You're looking at hard behavioral metrics, revenue, leads, coupon redemptions. All of these can be tied directly to copywriting that immediately preceded it. So it didn't happen a long time ago, but in fact, that very piece of copywriting right now generated that sale. Very easy to measure in very simplistic ways. Now, the thing with copywriting designed to generate long-term growth is that it's difficult to measure. And most people aren't analytics experts. Most people aren't looking at the long term. Most people don't even know how to do that. A lot of PhD researchers don't even know how to do that. So, of course, it's going to be a bit confusing for those that do want to invest in this space, but just don't know how to quantify it. So here, when we're trying to drive long-term growth, we're trying to plant the seeds, create the causes for future growth, we're looking more at soft psychological metrics. So we're looking at things like memory, share of mind, brand preference. We're also looking at delayed hard metrics. So things like market share, revenue, and increases or decreases in the probability that someone's going to purchase your brand. So there is a hard financial impact of this type of copywriting, but the cause of that is really about influencing people psychologically and not necessarily generating immediate behavioral change. So one of the key things here when we're looking at measuring the effects of copywriting is that longitudinal research is just so important. And this goes beyond marketing. This goes beyond copywriting. In all of science, longitudinal research is important. But most copywriters only focus on making a quick buck because often that's what they're incentivized to do. People are only going to be looking at the short-term results. But if we look at how advertising really works, and this is summarized really well in the book How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp, The true impact of advertising, the bulk of the impact of advertising, is actually spread very thinly across many people over time. So when advertising expenditures increase, there's not necessarily a huge influx in sales. And when advertising budgets are cut, there's not necessarily an immediate decrease in sales. So people come to the erroneous conclusion that, advertising doesn't work. Well, that's just not how it works. The way advertising works is by affecting people psychologically, making them think more often about a particular brand. And then when they happen to enter the market for a given product category, they're more likely to choose your brand. That's really how advertising works at scale. So really what advertising is doing for the most part is increasing your probability of buying from something that's small, let's say 1% to 2%. And that sounds slight, but when you scale that across many, many people over many years, the impact is actually huge. And that's the kind of copywriting that actually has the biggest impact in terms of long-term customer acquisition. It's designed to generate this long-term psychological influence. Now, to highlight the importance of longitudinal research, I'm going to step out of the marketing copywriting space for a second. I had unexplained weight gain, and I could not, for the life of me, figure out what caused it. Eventually, I did. I discovered that I was taking this medicine for acid reflux. It's called a proton pump inhibitor. Now, if you talk to any expert, you talk to a pharmacist, you talk to a doctor, and you say, I think I may be gaining weight from this, they're going to be oblivious. Most of them have never heard of this ever happening. And I think one of the reasons is because this type of medicine is typically designed to only be taken over a short term. So let's say a 4 or 5 month period. But if you're on this medicine for a year, there's a huge long-term impact. And we can see that when somebody finally decides to do an extensive longitudinal study. We can see the study here. We can see there's very high statistical significance, very high impact on people's body mass index. So if you only look at the short-term results of something, you're going to draw the wrong conclusion, because big impact, big results requires a lot of time. In this case, the outcome was bad, but what we're trying to do with copywriting is plant the seeds so that there's a positive long-term impact, but it's very difficult to measure without doing serious longitudinal research. So copywriters in general are addicted to quick wins. They're typically trained to do direct response, salesy types of copywriting. But long-term profits are really coming from market share, not from sort of this buy now copy that's tied directly to return on investment, that's tied strongly to specific calls to action, specific behavioral calls to action. But if you really want to build a competitive moat that protects long-term profits, really that's going to come from market share. It's going to come from economies of scale. It's going to come from the kind of copywriting that is going to increase what Byron Sharp calls mental availability. In other words, how often people are thinking of you. Building a brand in people's memory is important, even if it doesn't drive immediate sales. So if you look at how most copywriting is designed, it's designed to get you to fill out a lead form, to buy a product, to act on a specific discount. But the copywriting that's designed for long-term growth is really designed to influence your memory. They're just trying to get into your memory centers. And that's why when you see a lot of bizarre advertising out there, people that have some training in copywriting are going to say, oh, that's stupid, that's silly, nobody's ever going to buy a product because of that. But a more sophisticated copywriter is going to look at those silly ads and think, do people remember it more? Are they going to remember it in a year's time, in 5 years' time, when they're in the market for a luxury sedan and suddenly Mercedes comes to mind, or suddenly Burger King comes to mind when they're looking for a product that doesn't have too many false chemicals in it? So this might be a little bit shocking, but return on investment is not always best. So I'm going to give you a quote here from the book, How Brands Grow, Part 2. To be a big brand, you must reach out and attract many light category buyers. This is one reason that an ROI focus can keep a brand from growing. It seems counterintuitive to reach out to people who don't buy the category much, and so would appear to deliver low ROI. Ironically, focus on ROI can prevent a brand from benefiting from scale and earning larger, more secure profits. So, this obsession with ROI is incentivizing you to basically look at things at a micro level and not at a big impact level. So, what you're going to do is you're going to focus on highly targeted return on investment campaigns where the percentages are very high, but the financial impact might actually be dismal in terms of the long term. So if you focus your copywriting or some of your copywriting on long-term growth, on psychology, on memory, the long-term impact is going to be more revenue, even if the return on investment of that specific piece of copy is not as high as it would be with that's trying to design short-term revenue. So when we look at value investors, we look at people like Warren Buffett, Bruce Greenwald of Columbia Business School, we're able to determine what the source is for a company's value, how we value companies. And it's really at the balance sheet level. It's not at the income statement. So if we thought the source of value of a company was the income statement, then we would only run ads, copy that is designed to stimulate short-term sales. But that's really not fundamentally where value derives. So the main place that a company's value comes from is the balance sheet. And to increase the balance sheet, you have to invest. You got to invest in assets that are going to produce income. So the second place of value is the income, and this is where most copywriting is focused. Even though it's not the most important from a valuation standpoint, it's where most copywriters focus. So really, there should be this movement. Copywriters should be thinking a little more in terms of assets, things like the brand, and a little less in terms of how do we generate some quick hits right now. And then the third source of value in a company is really the future. It's what's going to happen down the road. So the lesson here, when we look at how companies are valued in the finance space, is invest in brand marketing. And brand marketing is going to operate fundamentally differently from direct response sales types of marketing, because we're trying to influence people psychologically and we're trying to embed ourselves in long-term memory, not just drive short-term behavioral change. So what the best companies do is they use copy for two reasons. Number one, to grow long-term demand, okay? They're planting the seeds, they're fertilizing the soil, they're creating that demand, and then later what they're going to do is harvest it. And when you do the harvesting, that's where the second type of copywriting comes in, which is to harvest short-term sales.